Good, thank you.
Good.
Scooter, you've been shown up by an infant.
What's that?
We've been shown up by an infant, so I need to push your presentation back a month or two. We're going to hear from Julia today.
That's right. That's right. That's totally fine with me. How old is the little one?
5 months.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yep.
She's cute.
Thank you.
So
Yeah,
cute.
she hasn't been here the last few Fridays, so she's making an appearance.
That's
Oh.
nice.
I'd like to think I'd like to think that's for me, right? I mean,
Yeah,
He wants to hear about commercialization.
I
That's
always
right.
give her the option. You know, I read the headline out loud and the title. Today she was like, I need to be at this one.
That's right.
Took a nap. She took a nap from 10 to 11 over here on the East Coast. And now she's ready to go.
So
Doing-
commercialization is a pretty big word for an infant.
Yeah.
Isn't that that's a classic medical device world, right? I mean, anyone else would just call it marketing or sales, right? But in medtech, we have to call it something fancy.
You know what? That's true. I've been in a lot of industries. I've never commercialized anything before this industry.
I know.
We never commercialized Jell-O. We just launched it.
Right. You sold
We
some of
launched
it,
a
right?
new, huh?
You sold some of it, right?
I did.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
fact,
sold some.
and this is a collector's item. I have I'll show you. It's kind of faded, and I recognize, it has questionable market value, but this is from 2000, the 100th anniversary of Jell-O, when we introduced sparkling white grape. And if you look closely, that's a very faded signature from Bill Cosby.
Wow.
Ah.
Wow.
Now has,
Do you kind of tuck that away? Is that why it stays hidden these days?
well, I mean, there's just, I put up my father's license plate. That little hat was worn by my infant Zachary 19 years ago, and that's a baseball trophy from 1977, only because anyone who knows me reasonably well knows how ridiculous it would be that I would actually show a sports trophy when I don't, use my privilege to exercise.
What's boring, Joe, is being the son of a research scientist. Everything came home in white boxes with type labels. We had more Pillsbury cakes before they were ever released than you could ever imagine. All with the same white box, the same white type label.
Consistent, I guess.
So Joe, back to the Jell-O box. It sounds like you commercialized that then, right? The Jell-O.
Actually, I wasn't on powdered. I was on ready to eat.
Okay, so
I was responsible for commercializing blueberry cheesecake snacks, which actually was the source of my first, what I call great depressive episode.
Why?
Oh no, love, we don't have an hour. This is stupid.
Oh, man.
But blueberry cheesecake was the reason that my then fiance said, Joey, either you see a psychiatrist or I don't know if this is going to work.
Oh,
Yep. I needed
Wow.
rock bottom
because of cheesecake, blueberry cheesecake.
blueberry cheesecake snacks.
Snacks, sorry, snacks. Not actual cheesecake, just tiny snacks. Like mini cheesecakes?
In a cup. Have you seen pudding
Cake
cups?
in a cup?
Have you
I'm
seen
not-
pudding cups?
No. Oh, like a muggin, like a cupcake. Like cake in a cup.
You Brits don't understand. Let's take this offline.
It's probably why we call it jelly instead of Jell-O.
Right.
I need to look this up. I need to know what this is. Blueberry cheesecake snacks.
In a cup like this.
Pudding cup.
Pudding
That's it.
cup.
Yep, that's it. Dwayne's got it. Dwayne's got
Yeah.
it.
Where's that, Dwayne? Show me.
Yeah.
Right, a tiny. Okay, right.
hmm
Oh,
Yeah, there you go. Who's that? Mr. Mancini, thank you.
I don't see the problem. Like cheesecake in a pot. I don't
Wayne, would
see
you do
why
that
that.
again? Look at the baby monitor. He's holding up a Jell-O snack.
That's it.
I mean, that looks nice. And then if
Okay,
it's
well,
cheesecake
just
bread-
imagine instead of it being red, that it was
Cheesecake.
yellowish with blue on top.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down for that. That sounds great.
Well, you'd have to travel back to 1998 because, as I predicted, it was a complete and utter failure.
Was it?
Yeah.
Would have been now I'd buy all of them.
Yeah.
All
Well,
the Here we go. Yeah, that looks great.
Reminds me
reason
when
was
we were
so-
doing snack pack pudding and all the problems we had coming up with the laminate structure to actually make it because it's form, fill, and seal. Sorry, just
Yeah,
it was
Right.
fun.
yeah. So you worked on hunts.
Yes.
Interesting how it all comes around, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now, while Scooter, I don't know if you've ever been on camera before with us, so we're going to give you a proper introduction. But first, Dean, I think this is the first time you've ever joined us.
That's right. That's right. It's first time.
This is the first headline out of 76 that caught your interest. Everyone else sucked, and you heard that Scooter was talking, and you were like, "I gotta tune in for that."
You know, for the last year plus, it's been kind of like the busiest time of my life. So started an agency and grew to got like over 36 people now working for us, and
Wow.
we've got a couple of big clients, and two of them are going through IPOs. I'm on a board of another company that's going through an IPO. So it's all about S1s. And it's funny because I haven't really done that before. I've done acquisitions and deals with the big companies I work with in the past. But so it's been insane. But yeah, so a couple of the products that I'm involved in actually are class 2 devices that are sold OTC. So this did catch my eye.
Wow, that's impressive. We're gonna have you speak at a future one of these, if your time allows.
Be my honor. Thank you.
You hear that, folks? It'd be his honor. Jonathan Saul, you're trying to push product in premium now? Anyone wants to buy my stuff? What's going on, man?
Well, we're going over the counter, so we got to clear out the point of care merchandise.
I don't clear it out, but you're going to continue to sell that too.
Yeah, but I don't think there's going to be as much demand at the point of care once we're populated outside of clinics and things like that. There's just so much business to be done with the general population.
Mm-hmm. So you could hook us all up with low price rapid tests.
Yeah, with pleasure. With pleasure. And
consumer packaged good, but
well, you know what? This presentation excites me because back in 2004, I brought a product that was class 2 medical device, a muscle stimulator, to the U.S. and got it authorized for sale to the public. So OTC. So this is going to be a fun one for me.
Scooter, I haven't had this kind of enthusiasm for any presentation. I mean, I've had some pretty impressive speakers on, but
I don't know what to make of it. I mean,
people who never show up are here.
This sounds like you're setting me up for failure. I mean, this is a classic case of like over-promising and under-delivering here, Joe.
Actually, I didn't promise anything. I just put your name up there, and then all of a sudden, everyone just started to.
Oh, let's face
something.
The future. I mean, the more and more consumers are demanding to have access to good medical care, to good devices, to good products. And the FDA is becoming very friendly at allowing things to cross over the line.
That's right. It is the Food and Drug Administration. It's funny. Having worked in food, I thought of them that way, and now I forgot that they do food. It's all 510Ks and stuff. We didn't 510K Jello.
But is it the champagne of Jellos? I love that little tagline you put on there.
There's that signature. If you guys want to get a screenshot of it, it's in my possession.
Joe, how old is that again? When did when did your team commercialize that, Joe? To stick with the theme here.
Yeah, we commercialized that back in 2000.
Okay.
In fact, one of these days, maybe I'll treat you to Joe's great big binder of marketing before medical devices. By the way, that was a picture of the shortest lived product in the history of the Post cereal company. So I don't want you to think that I've always been all about success, because there have been some lesser times that we typically reserve for late night crying fests.
With blueberry cheesecake.
That is not. Scooter, you're a bright guy. You want to take a guess why blueberry cheesecake failed?
That's a good question. I don't know. Was it solely because of the product?
No, solely because of the product. Should I eat into your? Oh, look at that! Eat into. So eat into your presentation with a a 2-minute answer to the case study why blueberry cheesecake snacks failed?
Yeah, you can't leave us with that tease.
Okay. When cheesecake snacks were introduced back in 1997, there was original and strawberry. And I remember it was around February, we were supposed to officially commercialize, which is to say launch. And we had an entire media plan. There was going to be huge TV, there was going to be coupon drops and all these other things. And once this product got stocked on the shelves, it was flying off. There was incredible demand. We took all marketing out. We had out of stocks all over the country. So, wow, okay, we built a lot of product. We stocked the shelves. We launched the product and it did famously. And I think it was 60-40, I don't remember what now, maybe 60% original and 40% strawberry. I was an associate brand manager on Jell-O, and it was made clear to me that my path to becoming a brand manager was successfully launch blueberry. That was it. If then, and there would be no promotion until I got that done. And we were to launch in October or something like that, or November. And so first, what color is blueberry?
It's a dark blue, no?
Almost purple. But
Yeah.
ask Middle America, for whom I'm making this product, what color is blueberry? They'll tell you. Well, I'm not an idiot. It's blue. It's in the name. So what was the right color? Then, what does blueberry in a gelatinous kind of saucy thing taste like? Have you ever been to IHOP and had their blueberry syrup?
It's been a while, but yeah, I think I have.
Okay, so that's one point of reference. So the next thing is to find in a home use test an average of what scores best in terms of the flavor profile. That aside, product aside, do you think that people who are, there are two kinds of people, right? There are people who've tried our cheesecake snacks at all and are in the category, or people who have never tried cheesecake snacks. Those are the two. What do you think the source of volume for blueberry cheesecake snacks would be? People who have already discovered cheesecake snacks or people who have never discovered cheesecake snacks?
No idea.
Okay, well, no really right answer, but the answer that I highly suspected was this product is almost going to entirely cannibalize one of its sister products. So instead of having this much room for 2 products, I have this much room, or maybe this much room for 3 products. Shelving space in a refrigerated case is quite finite, just as much as the refrigerator can hold. So something's coming out. Is it going to be another SKU of Jell-O, or is it going to be Swiss Miss that we kick out, or something like that? Chances are, for a luxury snack like this, because even as big as it was no pudding and it was no gelatin. What are we going to do as a retailer? Well, I'm going to pay you huge slotting fees to get the product on the shelf in the first place. And then we have to live or die on the velocity of how many products go off the shelf. So I needed to show financially what a huge win this was going to be. But I pretty much got an ulcer because I could not do it. I basically had to, sell my soul a little bit and okay, finance department, I kind of agree, but I did not agree. So what ended up happening is kind of what I predicted. I got a promotion. And not only did Cheesecake fail, but it took the rest of the franchise down with it. Because instead of having 2 huge performers, now I had one performer and then another one where they were kind of both down. And then the next time Swiss Miss came out with something, you have to target something that goes, and you're like, look at the turns on blueberry cheesecake. That's, my super double chocolate pudding snacks are going to do much better than that. Take that off, and so you lose that slot. Dun, 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 dun.
So does that? We need to get going here, but does that haunt you to this day? It kind of sounds like it.
Rather not talk about it.
The world of CPG, it's not a space that I have any experience in. It's always funny to hear these stories.
It was a hell of a lot tastier than this job, except I will say, at a 10X medical device conference with that ice cream social for which I'm well known. Why are you looking blankly at me? I had ice cream social at the one you came to, back when it was in your hometown.
You did.
You were at the very first 10X.
I was.
That, ladies and gentlemen, I hired Scooter at one point. You were
That's right.
full-time at Medtronic and your side gig was trying to shill for me.
That's right. Yeah.
You made some reasonable coin back then.
Yeah. There were I'm sure that would be kind of some interesting stories there to go back in time a little bit. Rewind the old Joe Hage, Scott Nelson connection.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you were one of the first friends that came out of this whole managing the group. You were like one of the first opportunists who glommed onto me. How
don't know
old
if
are your many children now?
I've got four kids. Oldest is 17. So two girls, two older girls, and then two younger boys. So 17, 15, and then 12 and 8. Yeah.
How rude.
It is. It's a busy household.
That's
Yeah.
a lot of mouths to feed. So this thing you commercialized, it made good money?
It did. It did. Yeah. Should we get to it?
Let's get to it. That's
Let's
about
get to
as
it.
soft an intro as you're going to get. And
Yeah.
look at those good looks, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, people are tuning in just for your handsomeness.
I'm
A little
sure.
bit.
I'm
A
sure.
little bit.
Here, let's see here. I'm going to share my screen. I've got something really special prepared here for the MDG crew. Can we see this?
Talking points.
All right. So
Really spared no expense.
it's very true. I mean, I'll even zoom in here just so everyone can see, you know.
Mhm.
So normally when Joe would reach out, or anyone with Joe's type of pedigree would reach out, I normally for something like this, I'd normally go right to like some fancy deck, right? I'm a commercial guy, you know, but you know, such is life. I thought a Google Doc would actually be a little bit better, a little bit easier to work with, you know, instead of me presenting, you know, maybe this will be a little bit more interactive, right? So here we go, right? That's the first talking point. Is this guy really working from a Google Doc? Yes, I could be. Am I the first one? Am I the first MDG guest to actually kind of
You may
present
not
with
be
a Google
the
Doc?
first one. You're the first one who chose to share his screen of it. This is supposed to just kind of be like, what I would have done is I would have seemed as though I was talking off the cuff and not let anybody know that I actually had my cue cards under the computer.
Well, I want
You've
to.
gone under behind the curtain.
Oh, so I mean, maybe you're giving me a little bit of credit here for actually preparing some talking points. That's kind of what it sounds like.
No, I was actually saying the opposite, but please continue.
Okay. Nonetheless, who okay, so these next 40 minutes here, who is this for? I know some folks joined in because they've had, you know, previous D2C or OTC experience in the past, or maybe are getting into it. That's really what we're going to focus on here, right? Is taking a kind of a quote unquote scary class 2 device, and I'll tell my story on how you can it's not so scary commercializing it, selling it direct to consumer, entirely online. So this is kind of what this is for. Now, having said that, all of the stuff that we'll chat about here applies to non-D2C audiences, which we'll get into in more detail. So even if you don't have a product that you're commercializing D2C today, a lot of the stuff is still applicable, because at the end of the day, we all sell to people, right? So even if you're in a B2B capacity, you're selling to a person, right? A customer. So anyway, that's who this is for. So a little bit about me. Why should you even care what I have to say is a good question. You know, and maybe Joe can provide some additional support here. I mean, I'm just a guy that grew up in Iowa. I mean, for all for all practical purposes, and went to a public school, right? So why should you care? So I joking aside, I do have a bit of an interesting background in the sense that I've spent my entire professional career in traditional med tech, primarily the peripheral vascular space. So Joe mentioned Medtronic, but I got kind of my start with a company called ConMed, and then moved into the vascular arena with Bard, which is now Becton Dickinson. Spent a little bit of time at Boston Scientific, and then ended up joining Covidien through their acquisition of Bacchus Vascular, which was a thrombectomy device before mechanical thrombectomy became popular. And so spent time with Covidien, and stayed on through the acquisition, or Medtronic's acquisition of Covidien. So, I mean, it's kind of like a classic kind of medical device kind of resume, right? But kind of in parallel, Joe mentioned this, I've always been interested in side hustles, digital marketing, etc. Dating back to, gosh, 2008, 2009, when I started a med tech podcast called MedSider, just to experiment and network.
How many episodes have you?
Have I recorded?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I mean, that kind of tells you a little bit more about,
And go ahead, don't share your slides anymore, because then you become a small little box for most people as opposed to the great presence that you are.
Okay, let me stop sharing. Okay, so what was the question?
We were answering how many podcasts.
Podcasts. Yeah, I don't know. It's a podcast that's mainly focused on the startup scene, right? I primarily interview founders, CEOs of smaller companies. That's kind of what I do with MedSider. It's where I gravitate. Most of my interests gravitate towards. But yeah, and then dating back to kind of the 2015 timeframe, I was working on a couple different projects while I was still at Medtronic. One was a classic medical device play with a couple engineers in Minneapolis. Another one was this red light therapy product, which turned into Joovv, Joovv. So if you just type that into your browser, you can kind of see a little bit about what it is. But it's technically referred to as photobiomodulation or photomedicine. And so this was something completely new to me at the time. In fact, I thought it was a bogus therapy. My wife actually.
Call up the website.
What's that?
Call up the Joovv website so we can see what you're talking about.
So you want me to share my screen again, Joe?
Well, it's different than the Word doc, yeah.
All right.
So you were introduced to this technology?
Yes, I was introduced to this technology through my wife and her sister, who actually went or purchased a red light therapy package at a local spa in Minneapolis. And they, at the time, that's kind of where you could really only access full body red light therapy. Again, this was back in like early 2015. They really enjoyed it, but didn't really like going to a spa on a consistent basis, right? It required it's almost kind of like if you go to a tanning salon, right? You got to go like 2 or 3 times a week in order to experience the benefits. So they didn't really, that wasn't overly convenient. Plus it's not overly budget friendly too. And so they were looking for products they could use at home. And when she first brought it up, my wife is much more open to alternative health than I am. I tend to be a little bit more of a cynic. And so I thought it was completely bogus, right? Like shine red light on your skin and you see all these kinds of benefits. That sounds like a late night QVC commercial. She really liked the therapy. And so I started digging into the research, and little did I know, on PubMed, there was 3,000 plus published manuscripts around this concept of photobiomodulation or PBM or low level laser therapies, as sometimes it's referred to. In fact, there's an entire subspecialty of medicine that's referred to as photomedicine, right? Where there's conferences where, PhDs and MDs and other academics and clinicians get on podium and actually, present their work. So anyway, it was a thing, but at the time there wasn't really a whole lot of there's 2 major gaps that I saw. One was that there weren't a lot of products that were designed for home use, especially full body applications. And then secondarily, it was really hard to learn anything about this, about the therapy, unless you, wanted to dig into PubMed or piecemeal a bunch of like scientific literature together to figure out kind of like how this actually works in layman's terms. And so it seemed like there was an opportunity there, one from a product standpoint and one from an awareness standpoint to really take advantage of. And so I started prototyping. I'm going to fast track here so we can get into some of the good stuff here about what I've learned over the past 4 or 5 years. But we started prototyping in 2015, launched our first device in early 2016. Again, total side hustle. I had another full-time job at the time, and threw up a Shopify site in early 2016. By the end of that year, again, totally bootstrapped, not pouring any money into paid acquisition, really just kind of bootstrapping this, trying to build relationships in the health and wellness community with influencers on the side. And by the end of 2016, we did slightly over 100K in top line revenue. So it was like, this is not, this is kind of a nice little side gig,
How much does each unit cost?
At the time, the AOV was, our average order value was around $500 or $600 at the time. Now it's, about double that.
Is it just this white box I keep saying in the loop?
No. So if you, the core devices, so Joovv is kind of most known for this concept of in-home full body light therapy through this modular design. And so you can start with one device like this, like kind of a panel, and then you can connect them together to build out a full system like this.
I have to ask, and I'm sorry if you mentioned it and I didn't quite catch it. This product didn't exist before you and your wife got involved?
So light therapy has been around for decades, but it's traditionally been hard to access. Most of the time, most of the literature is rooted in laser-based energy sources, and lasers are very expensive. You have to typically go to a commercial facility to get access to those. And then and there's been several kind of I would say lower quality kind of LED based devices that were very small, that you could find on Amazon, back in kind of the early 2015 timeframe. But since then, the space is really kind of, it's really, I mean, over the past 5 years has really, really grown up, so to speak. I think a lot of that probably has to do with what we've done with Juve and raising more awareness for the science of and the benefits of light therapy. But there's a lot more players in the space now, of course. Not just with similar devices, but across the board, all types of sizes and shapes and
Were you the first one to bring red light to the home?
You could probably say that. Yeah.
And how did you source your product from someone who was making red light for commercial uses?
Correct. Yeah, and back in kind of 2015 timeframe, again, we didn't have, this was totally bootstrapped. So we were looking for the kind of the lowest cost to entry, right? Where we could actually determine, does this thing actually have legs? Do we have traction here? And so we worked with a supplier to basically modify their existing product.
So the concept was between you and your wife, somehow you came up with the idea, wouldn't this be great if there were an at-home version of this?
Correct.
Looked for it, there was nothing online. You thought, I've got tens of thousands of dollars to throw at this. Let's see if anything sticks. You found a supplier, you made a pretty site, you started some relationships, you got some traction, and then you got more and more invested until you quit your job and made this a full-time gig.
You got it. So by early 2017, so about a year after initially launching, we had pretty solid signals of product market fit, right? And that's probably the first lesson I would probably offered it to anyone that's interested in hearing my advice is, like, when you're thinking about D2C and over-the-counter devices, it's so easy to get lost in the world of like traditional med tech and pouring a bunch of costs into product. And again, it's nuanced, right? We all know it's a nuanced space, and you have to dot your I's and cross your T's. But try to think creatively about what's the easiest path, the fastest path to figure out if you've got any sort of semblance of product market fit. And so that's the path that we took. It allowed us to get there, on a tight budget. But we had it within about a year. When I'm referring to I'm referring to product market fit. And so that allowed us to kind of really determine, okay, how do we want to move this business, move this business forward?
Regulatory, were you considered basically a reseller and therefore didn't have to worry about it because it's a class 2 device, you said?
Yep. And so this device, and actually the landscape's changed when it comes to light therapy quite a bit. But this particular device, it's a class 2 device, but the product code is ILY. And FDA changed their guidance in the fall of 17, I believe, where it became an exempt device. And so
what's ILY?
That's the product code, ILY.
Okay.
And so because it's an exempt device, that means that you, for anyone that's not familiar, you have to you basically don't have to submit a 510K for this particular product code. That doesn't mean that you actually don't have to run your PDP, your product development project, as if you would. You still have to do that, but you just don't have to submit to FDA. FDA considers this non-significant risk device, and so they don't actually require you to submit. So that's an important kind of nuance, because it does allow you to to probably move a bit faster than you otherwise normally would. What's that?
I suspect more than a bit.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, there's a MedSider.
When you sold your first unit, what regulatory work had you done?
When we sold our first device, I mean, without getting too far into the weeds, I would say, I mean, I know enough, based on my med tech experience, enough to get myself in trouble when it comes to the
questions. Okay, well, we won't.
Regulatory waters. But yeah, I mean, we understood kind of the landscape and predicates to use, and you know, how FDA would view us based on whether or not we were actually developing specifications versus just importing versus relabeling, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, it was. We again, we were looking to primarily figure out if we had any sort of semblance of product market fit, and so we didn't want to pour a ton of time and resources and budget without determining that. And so again, kind of back to lessons learned that actually proved to be pretty successful for us, right? And I would just encourage everyone to figure out, try to see look for those signals as early as possible before going all in on.
I invited Larry and Maya to come on camera. Neither has accepted my invitation yet. Larry is formerly FDA, and Maya commercializes a laser device right now. And I just wonder what, if anything, they are thinking at this point in your presentation. Maya, I can't see you yet.
Well, while we're waiting on them, just real quick, I for MedSider, I recently interviewed Rohan Dixit, who's the CEO of Leaf Therapeutics, and they've got a kind of a wearable diagnostic device, and it's a completely different product, but they followed a kind of I wouldn't say a completely similar path, but something that's analogous to Juve, in that their first product was just a consumer product, right? So they scaled back claims and what they could say around it, but it did allow them to launch very early and really get a lot of really valuable feedback from their customer base. And then they then, I wouldn't say pivoted, because they still have their consumer product, but they did end up launching a sort of, for lack of a better description, a medical, more of a medical grade wearable product as well. So anyway, that did allow them to basically learn a lot, right, and get to market faster and learn a lot by launching a consumer product first.
Maya, what are you thinking?
Well, oh gosh, what am I thinking? Sorry, I have a little bit of a cold. Well, so we have a 510, FDA clearance as well on our lasers, and I mean, we got that sort of before I got involved, so I don't know all of the details on kind of what went into that, but we did also recently have our FDA person. Well, I guess it's been a couple of years now, but draft up, and I don't remember what it's called, but some sort of long description of why it's okay for us to also sell to consumers. So we can also sell, or over the counter, I guess. So we do also sell our lasers over the counter, but I think with the price point on our lasers, I mean, we more often sell to practitioners like, chiropractors, physical therapists, MDs, acupuncturists.
Your lowest price point is what?
So the lowest one is just under $3,000.
Oh, well, that's still probably out of reach for most homes, I'm thinking. And are you red light? No.
No, so ours are lasers. I mean, they're class 2 medical devices as well. But yeah, they're lasers, although the Giga laser, our large area laser that I have sitting right here, combines laser and LED. So it kind of does, does both. But yeah, in general, all of our lasers have actual lasers in them. So
what benefits do you advertise with the device you just showed us?
Oh, so for this one, so it's one of the largest area lasers in the world. So with this one, you could treat like the whole lower back, you could do a whole face, a whole shoulder, a whole ankle. Large area of the body. And combining the laser with the LED, so laser penetrates deep into the tissue, increases the production of ATP, increases the blood circulation, enhances the immune system, reduces pain and inflammation. So that's kind of what laser does, and at least from my understanding, the LED does increases the blood circulation, increases the production of collagen tissue, but it doesn't go quite as deep as laser does. So combining the two is really good for, well, a number of things like back pain or like wounds or arthritis pain, and I mean, just a lot of different things.
Okay.
So that's kind of a long explanation, but.
And Scott, what benefits do you advertise that you support?
So I mean, we position these devices primarily for general health and wellness. So when you look at the actual intended use under that IOI product code, it's like most of the language speaks to the reduction of pain increase of blood circulation. But also there's language around, general medical use, which is very, very vague, obviously. But most of our kind of benefit claims are really centered more around FDA's general wellness guidance more so than anything. Yeah, what we're talking about here is just differences in energy sources, right? LED versus laser. So yeah, the wavelengths delivered can be the wavelengths delivered from both types of energy sources can be dialed in, laser more specifically than LED. But ultimately, you're trying to leverage certain wavelengths of light to induce a certain physiological impact at a cellular level.
Fair enough.
Can I ask what wavelength you use?
We use 660 nanometers, which falls in the
Okay.
red spectrum, and then 850 nanometers, which is the near infrared. So not infrared light is the infrared light spectrum is very broad, right? So some people probably are familiar with like infrared saunas. Those are mid and far infrared wavelengths that produce heat. That's why they're great for the purposes of a sauna. But near infrared actually doesn't produce much heat, but does have the unique ability to penetrate deeper into the tissue.
Right.
Okay, thanks, Maya.
Yeah. So let's get into this, Joe, if we can. Let's get into some D2C stuff, tactics, I guess, right? That we used at Juve, because I think those would be kind of interesting, I think, for probably most people to hear about. You game with that? Your show. But before I go there, just to kind of wrap up that conversation around, the benefits of photobiomodulation. If you're interested at all, it is a very unique therapy. It's one that I think is only going to trend upwards. This concept of light being beneficial for our health, right? Most of us are familiar with how our bodies respond to UV wavelengths of light. Our bodies can produce vitamin D in response to those wavelengths of light. The same kind of concept holds true with red and near infrared light. It's very beneficial for our bodies. So it is, if you're interested at all, it's definitely kind of a compelling therapeutic arena that's only going to probably get more popular.
My first exposure to it was back at Cardiac Science now, some 12 years ago. I had a colleague who suffered from seasonal depression, and she used to have a very bright light that she brought into her cubicle to help her. That was the first I'd ever heard of anything like it. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, it's probably a SAD or seasonal affective disorder, bright white light. Yes. Yeah. So on that note, so let's talk a little bit about what channels or initiatives that we found successful at Juve. So like I said before, we didn't raise capital. We never have, fortunately. We've been able to build the company on the bootstrap or on the backs of influencer marketing. And I'll for the purposes of this conversation, I'll call it influence marketing because I think there's a kind of an interesting delineation between the two. So that's how we built the company and continue to experience a lot of success with that channel. But early on, we leveraged the concepts in terms of commercialization. We leveraged kind of the framework and the concepts that were laid out in the book Traction. That was co-authored by Gabriel Weinberg, who's the founder of DuckDuckGo, and then Justin Mares, who's kind of a well-known guy in the DTC space. He founded Kettle and Fire, a bone broth company, and also Perfect Keto, which is a company, a CPG company that makes and sells products kind of for people that are into the ketogenic diet. But combined, those two companies do over $100 million in annual revenue. So the guy, he knows a thing or two about DTC marketing. And so anyway, that book is great. If anyone wants to dig into it, it's called Traction. And the concept is really built around this Bullseye methodology, which is pick basically three channels, if you will, and run experiments, right? They could be short experiments. They could be, a little bit longer experiments, meaning 1 to 3 months, kind of depending on what you're testing. Joe, you're still sharing your screen, right? I am not. I'm not sharing my screen. What I was doing just now is I found the link to the book Traction, and I'm going to share it with everybody. Got it. Okay. Anyway, yeah, it's a great book. I highly recommend it. But it's centered around this Bullseye methodology, which is again, you're gonna. The idea is that you pick 2 to 3 channels or initiatives that you want to test and run experiments against, with the goal of finding out what sticks, right? What works, and if it works, you continue to double down on that until it doesn't.
And so again, relatively simple concept, but really proved to be pretty successful for us. I know it's worked well for other D2C brands as well. And so we use that framework and that methodology, still leverage it today, although we know a lot more about and can attribute data more accurately with our business, but we still leverage that general concept, and it's pretty successful. So kind of going back to influencer marketing, let me pause there. And what does anyone, when you think of influencer marketing, what do people think of? It's kind of
and all I can do there, stop share. I was like,
anyone.
When I think of influencer marketing, I think I want to be like Mike, where I have a celebrity spokesperson, or I find some Instagram,
Instagrammers
who's like, oh, I love this makeup.
Instagrammers, YouTubers, right? That's probably what most people think of. And Alan, I'm looking at the Q&A here. Alan's question was, are you selling Juve through professional healthcare channels or only direct to consumer? Primarily D2C, right? So historically, 90 to 95% of top line revenue is driven through D2C. Although that B2B channel pre-COVID was turning out to be pretty successful for us. When I say B2B, I'm talking about professional healthcare channel. Anyway, that's hopefully that answers your question. But anyway, influencer marketing, yeah. So that's what most people think of, is like, a TikToker, an Instagrammer, a YouTuber, right? And getting them to basically, talk about your product. But the fundamental kind of like concept here, when you start to think about influencer marketing, is really just finding anyone or anything of influence, right? That your prospective customers follow or consume. Right. And so it could be someone like Joe mentioned, like, want to be like Michael Jordan. It could be, a well-known Instagrammer, podcaster, YouTuber, et cetera. It could be, in the world of medtech, we're used to people, influencer marketing really being physicians, right? Physicians on podium, kind of pitching clinical data that we sponsored, or clinical studies that we helped fund, whatever the case may be. But all of that is really influence marketing, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a person. It could be a publication. It could be an event, an influential event. It could be an influential community, right? So that's really, all of that falls under what I consider influence marketing. And some of us in the world of medtech think about PR a lot. PR can really, or earned media can fall under that influence marketing. And all of those worlds are really colliding, right? In the world of D2C marketing. Those lines are blurring, right? And so that's why I think it's a lot more accurate to describe it as influence marketing versus influencer or earned media or PR. It's all about finding people or publications or channels that drive influence into your core target audience. And so that strategy has worked extremely well for Juve. It still is, I would argue, across all stages of a funnel, right? Top of funnel, mid funnel, bottom of funnel, as you get closer and closer to a sale. That impacts all stages, right? So of the kind of the customer buying process.
Make sure I understand the distinction you make is influencer. It's a person, and influence can be any source of popular media.
You got it. And I know this still continues to surprise us with Juve. And I mentioned our AOVs are relatively high, right? For consumer product, it's north of $1,000. But don't underappreciate those channels of influence. For us, it's been largely health and wellness folks that have some sort of content outlet, right? Whether it's a podcast, whether it's a blog, whether it's a popular YouTube channel or Instagram handle. All of those folks typically produce a fair amount of content, and in the health and wellness space, they can be incredibly influential. And I think, Jonathan, you mentioned kind of at the outset of this call, like this is a trend, right? People, consumers taking more ownership of their healthcare, and it absolutely is. I've seen that firsthand over the past 4 or 5 years. There's this under this burgeoning kind of trend happening where that's absolutely the case, and people are willing to spend money on a lot of money on these types of products, especially as their insurance deductibles become more and more expensive. People are being a lot more proactive about where they invest their money in health dollars. And so that's absolutely the case. And don't underappreciate influencer marketing when it comes, if you have a D2C product. most people that are willing to spend $300, $400, $500 on something related to their health, they view certain influencers, right, almost as if they were their doctor or their practitioner. That's how much influence these people can really drive. As an example, we first got our start with an influencer by the name of Ben Greenfield. Actually, not too far away from you, Joe, up in Spokane. But he hosts a pretty popular fitness podcast called Ben Greenfield Fitness. Not huge. It's not like a Joe Rogan or a Tim Ferriss, but sizable audience to say the least. But his audience is incredibly committed to him, and trust pretty much anything he says when it comes to health. And a lot of the topics he covers are very, very granular in nature.
How did you approach this person? And Andre asked, how much does an influencer cost? And it can be from $1 to millions. I mean, if the influencer is Kim Kardashian versus Joe Hage, I mean, I charge way more than she.
Of course, rightfully so, right? So what is it? So what was the first? I'll handle the cost question, but what was the other question? You answer. How do you get in front of them? I'll take that one second. The cost question first. It literally is the Wild West in terms of how much. There is no like standard going rate. That I would say well, that's one thing. There is no kind of standard going rate. And two, when you think about working with influencers, I would encourage everyone to think a little bit more about having an omni-channel, working with them in an omni-channel fashion. So what I mean is typically most influencers that actually have a loyal audience, they produce content across a lot of different channels, right? They typically have a podcast. They likely repurpose a lot of the podcast content across their blog. They probably have a large Instagram channel. They maybe have gotten into YouTube, et cetera. So when you work with these influencers, try to leverage all of those channels when you put together agreements with them. So that's the first lesson. Second lesson is don't. And I had a chat with another CEO recently, a couple weeks ago, that just closed a round for her company, and we were talking about this very thing, and their experiments around podcast advertising, and I told her kind of going really broad with podcast advertising could be considered a form of influencer marketing, but it really isn't, because it's too broad. You need to work one-on-one with these influencers, right? They need to actually believe in your product. And if they believe in it and they like it, they're going to speak with it in a more, they're going to speak to it with more in a more genuine way with their audience, and that comes through across all of these channels, right? It comes through in their ad reads, it comes through in their their pitches across Instagram, et cetera. So make sure that that you actually are working with these influencers on a one-to-one basis versus just kind of a spray and pray type of approach. But going back to your comment, Joe, how do we actually work with them? So this is kind of interesting. It's a bit of a hack that we took early on, because anymore, most influencers that drive or that have large audiences, they're typically it's typically kind of a pay-to-play scenario, right? You've got to commit some sort of dollars to them for them to start talking about your product. But early on, we were fortunate in that I was reaching out again on the side to a bunch of these folks because I had no relationships in the health and wellness space, and my pitch to them was, let us do a kind of an Ask Me Anything interview for our blog, for the Juve blog, and we'll ask fun, interesting questions to them. And then that served as a form of content for us, right? It put us in the same ecosystem as an influencer. And it opened the conversation to a possible affiliate relationship with Juve.
Who was being asked, you or him?
So I was asking the influencer. This was the pitch, basically, right? It was email. It was an email pitch, right? So it was, hey, so and so. It was. I'd have to. It'd be interesting to actually pull up some of these emails. But the pitch was not a lot about Juve, right? Maybe a small tease around what we're doing. It was more around, hey, we want to do this fun Ask Me Anything interview with you. We've got a series of fun questions. It's super easy. Shouldn't take more than a few minutes of your time. Let me know if you're interested and I'll send you over the questions, right? It was something very short, right? And so we used that approach instead of a, hey, so-and-so, can you become an affiliate for us, right?
Right, sure.
Two different approaches, right? And so ours was a little bit more of a longer play, but it was synergistic in nature, right? Because it allowed us to build content, right, for our blog. Again, it allowed us to kind of be in the same ecosystem as this influencer, and it opened the door, right, to a potential conversation.
Really, the first thing, if I were approached with that, would be, well, how big is your audience? And you didn't really have an audience.
We didn't.
So
we didn't.
Were you on Reddit for Ask Me Anything?
No. So we took the concept, Ask Me Anything concept from Reddit, of course, but this play here was largely, I mean, I stole it from a guy by the name of Ryan Holiday, right? Who's he's written several books now, but he's
Are you a big reader?
Oh, I mean, I
Are you a
wouldn't
big
consider myself
podcast listener?
a bit of both. But anyway, the Ryan Holiday. So his first book was called Trust Me, I'm Lying: Confessions of a Media Manipulator.
I think I remember that.
Wrote it back in like 2009, 2010 timeframe. But he's pretty popular author now. Anyway, in that book, he talks about this concept called working up the chain, meaning all you have to do is get one thing under your belt, one form of media, right? And then use that to leverage, to work up the chain, to leverage other folks within that have bigger audiences, right? So with us, and using that Ask Me Anything approach, was just needed a couple people that were like micro influencers, right, to do it, right? And then I used those then to work up the chain, right, to find the next bigger influencer. And then once I had that influencer under my belt, I worked up the chain to find the next bigger influencer. And so that concept of working up the chain still works today. I mean, it's still, I've seen that play out even with MedCider, right? I mean, I
started off with interviewing people like Joe Hage, and now you're the CEO of Leaf.
No, but that concept holds true, right? That working up the chain concept. So that's what we used early on.
Classic Cialdini stuff.
Yeah. You got it. So
yeah.
So anyway, that's just kind of some hacks and tactics that we use to kind of slowly start to build. But I guess the message here around influence marketing, I realize we're up against the clock here.
No, these things don't go an hour.
Okay.
They drop off whenever they like, but as long as I'm entertained,
I've got a hard stop, but let me slack.
You have a hard stop in 3 minutes? Oh, come on.
I do.
How did you book something so close to this?
It came up recently. Maybe we'll do a round two. Let me slack him to see if I can.
Yeah, that's right. Push him back. Tell him right now I'm on camera. I have an international audience. Don't do this.
An international audience.
You do have an international audience.
That's right. It's true. That's true. Yeah.
As long as Eddie and Claire stay on, and David, they're all in the UK.
So
Do we have any other countries represented here today? I don't think so.
Spoken from a true marketer. Okay. Let's see here. So let's talk a little bit about, let's go beyond influence marketing. Let's talk about SEO, right?
Andre says New Jersey as a country that's being represented. Actually, I was going to say Rick Stockton's in Texas because I think they're going to secede from the union at some point.
That's right. I'm in California, right? I mean, I guess the same thing could be true out here. So SEO, right? Search engine optimization, kind of a popular, most people that are probably listening to this have heard of this. I know, Joe, you've produced a fair amount of content in your day about SEO. I would say when you're thinking about SEO, it certainly worked out well for Juve. But it's definitely a longer play, a longer term play. I mean, if you think SEO might be a strategy that will serve your business well from a commercialization standpoint, just expect that it's going to be at the bare minimum a 12-month play, most likely 18 to 24 months, especially if you've got a new domain. But SEO in terms of like,
say it's a year-long thing. I mean, I would think it's month to month or however long you choose to keep the budget open.
Yeah, I should say a long-term game. I guess that depends on your point of reference. What I mean is, like, it's not like you can pour money into Facebook or Instagram ads and expect some sort of immediate ROI on SEO. It just doesn't work that way. So I would go into it thinking, knowing that you need to commit.
Okay, let me be clear, just so we keep our terms straight. SEO, are you saying organic or SEM where you're paying?
Not paid search, organic.
Oh, okay, yeah, organic, absolutely. Very long-term game.
Yeah, organic SEO. Yep. But don't ignore it, especially if you have a product that requires a fair amount of education.
Yeah.
Right. And most of us, right, in the world of medtech, kind of operate in that world, right, where people need to be educated about your product. And this brings in kind of the regulatory nuances that we're used to in the world of the medical device space. But just know that you do have don't be afraid of that, right? Because I know a lot of us that are in the world of medtech often get concerned about what kind of content we can produce and is it the regulatory oversight, et cetera. But there's a lot of precedence for disseminating educational content even content that may be deemed off-label by FDA. There's a precedent for being able to do that. It's a First Amendment right. You can actually listen to a long-form interview I did it with a guy by the name of Mark Duvall, who runs Duvall Regulatory Law,
sure.
where we go into a topic. And
did you meet him at 10X? He was at my first 10X.
oh, he was. I don't think so. But
Oh,
nonetheless, yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, so just it could be a very good channel for your business, and don't be afraid of kind of navigating the regulatory waters when it comes to SEO. And I bring this up at SEO because in the world of medical devices, like I said, most of our products require education, and that any product that is that has a longer buying cycle and that requires a fair amount of education tends to lend itself, in my opinion, pretty well to an SEO play, where you can build out more of a moat around your business, around your product if you do it well. And so I think it's definitely we're not going to get into the intricacies of SEO and how to do that right. Maybe that's Joe, you can
another day.
Yeah, that's another day. But anyway, it's a channel that you shouldn't ignore if you're going direct to consumer with a medical device. And it's worked extremely well for Juve, right? We had this hypothesis early on that it would be a moat opportunity, going back to this concept around that I mentioned earlier, this gap in kind of the marketplace around the awareness of light therapy or red light therapy, right? It was really hard to find information in layman's terms back in kind of that 2015, 2016 timeframe. And so we figured, well, if no one really is talking about this, there's a lot of science to support it. We'll talk about it, then we'll start talking about it and build out a little bit of an SEO moat ourselves.
I'm sharing my screen because I just wanted I was really impressed when I did this. Well, I'm surprised that showed up because I went to an incognito just for this reason, so that it wouldn't. Of course, you win your term, which is critical. And I don't know the last time you did this, but I really love this. People also ask business. Red light therapy is generally considered safe, even though researchers aren't exactly sure how and why it works. And there are no set rules on how much light to use. Too much light may damage skin, too little may not work. But you got CNET coverage, a lot of, look at this Juve alternative with the the best. Now, the fact that there's someone who wrote this article, are you like, I don't imagine there are any like Nielsen ratings or metrics where how other red light therapies are doing, but are you the leader, do you think?
I would say one of them, right? I mean, you see Juve start to show up in all of these market research reports now, right? Amongst other players that have been around for quite some time.
Juve isn't the only option, is his subhead. Man, you've made it when you're not the only option.
Yeah, there's been a lot of fast followers. Actually, that's something that I wasn't going to talk about. But if you do have a product that is that doesn't have a significant barrier to entry, right? Like this, right?
But Daddy's on a podcast. Come on.
But if you have a product that doesn't have a significant barrier to entry, just expect like this type of activity is going to happen to you as well, right? This fast follower, these fast followers, and so the lesson there is just know it's coming and prepare for it, and try to focus on those defensible moats that you can build from a commercial standpoint.
Have you attempted to, because you're not on page 1 for me anyhow, for the term red light therapy?
Yeah, that's a bit of a different. That's a bit of a, we had to kill a bunch of content due to regulatory risks. Yeah. It was more of that was an internal. What's that?
Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's just more of an internal decision versus anything else. Like as Juve continues to, as the company continued to grow, right, the target just becomes bigger and bigger, right? That's the target on your back. And so with that, there's more of a focus, right? Not just from FDA, but FTC as well. And I would argue FTC is probably the bigger regulatory body that you need to be concerned about in the world of DDC, not necessarily FDA. But yeah, it's just there's a lot of basically content that we removed from our site just to continue to de-risk the company. So yes, I do have to jump here in like 5 minutes, so I want to be cognizant of that.
I use 30 seconds of it to ask, were you the content producer? I imagine you were.
Correct. Yeah. And actually, on the notion of SEO, since we kind of talked a little bit about influence marketing, there's a lot of synergy between both of those, right? So as an example,
masks. I had no idea this. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So as an example, when you work with influencers, right, that have a podcast, that have a blog, et cetera, if you take more of that omni-channel approach, right, say you run a podcast ad, right? Well, typically podcasters are going to produce, show notes, or they're going to repurpose their podcast content in the form of a blog, right? And then if you advertise or they talk about your product there, you're going to get a link, a backlink back to your site, right? If you work with those influencers and they have a blog, right? Approaching them with a guest article, some type of guest article, right? Where you basically write the content for them, and use certain anchor text with hyperlinks back to your site. All of that's synergistic in nature, so you can kind of build, work with influencers or publications, right? And yet still be thinking about SEO at the same time.
Tell me about this.
Between the two.
How successful has this little thing been?
Yeah, quiz. Yeah, extremely successful. In fact, it's
I'm
definitely
shocked that you started with tell us your name. I'm like, why do I need to tell you that? I'm taking a quiz. What do you mean?
Yeah. Why the name first?
Did you A/B test this at all?
This particular the name first. I don't know if we A/B split tested that. I would say if you're running a quiz, there's two things I would say here. One is quizzes in the world of DTC are extremely popular. You've probably seen them quite a bit before.
Wouldn't know this right off the bat.
Yeah. So anyway,
Okay, go ahead.
So quizzes are extremely popular, so I definitely consider it, right? Another kind of best practice is don't ask for an email too early in the quiz, right? Make sure you ask for it at the end of the quiz. Otherwise, you'll see a ton of fall off, of drop off. But yeah, quizzes are extremely popular. I would highly recommend it. And it gives you a very clear opportunity to not only educate people that are hitting your website and trying to learn more about your product. Most of them are trying to figure out which is best for them, their individual use case.
It was back in 2017 that I first attended a presentation that said that gating was dead, and I was like, how could it be dead? I'm kind of there.
That gating is dead?
Yeah. Gated content.
Yeah. I think you should be extremely careful about what content you want to gate. But asking
just a simple yes or no answer to Sanjeev's question: is red light therapy similar to infrared therapy? Yes or no?
Yeah, I would say it's similar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah. Just to touch on that real quickly, the differences between the two is that there's a different mechanism of action at a cellular level. But when you're talking about near infrared light, that's similar to red light therapy. But like an infrared sauna, that's different. Those are mid and far infrared wavelengths of light, which produce more heat. So anyway, kind of
all my distractions keep you from telling us in a minute. What that we didn't cover because I interrupted you so many times?
the three
that you wanted to talk about today?
The three things?
Or anything, like what are the points that we run out of time?
Okay, so we talked about influence marketing, right? The differences between influence marketing and influencer marketing. Yes. We talked about SEO and the synergies between the two. And the last one, since we're on the topic of gating, don't forget about asking for emails, right? You need to be asking for an email address at every opportunity, not in an annoying way. But to this day, we still attribute around 20% of our top line revenue to email marketing, right? It's not a top of funnel. It's not top of funnel per se, but it's definitely a driver of mid funnel and bottom of funnel conversion. And so, so ask for an email with every opportunity. Don't make the mistake of just assuming people are not going to opt in to your offer, right? It needs to be a compelling offer, right? You need to give them like a very valid reason to give you an email address, and maybe that's as simple as just a discount, right?
Yeah, I think that makes sense for your business. I would say that a lot of the folks on the call who are independent consultants who are trying to gate their, guide to FDA, whatever, it could go either way.
Right. Well, I would say in that, B2B is obviously B2B email marketing is a little bit different. But don't forget about email as a channel. It still works. That's the one communication method that almost everyone still looks at, right, is email. So don't forget about it, and don't give up on it either, right? If you don't get many email opt-ins, don't think that it just doesn't work. Take a closer look at your offer. Like what are you giving in exchange for that email? Is the exchange fair? Is it reasonable? Think a little bit more in depth about that, but don't forget about email marketing.
I really enjoyed this. I'm sorry you have to go.
Yeah, we could probably go on for a couple hours about this.
I know that you can.
What's that?
I know that you can. In fact, I think this is the first interaction ever where you try to, say, hey, look, I gotta go.
Well, I do need to go, but no,
Marvelous.
thanks for having me on.
Yeah, this was great.